So today we are continuing in our series of messages as we've been talking about this road, right? The road that leads to life. And we started it on Ash Wednesday. We started it in Ashes, right? And we eventually will make our way all the way to the journey to the cross with Jesus, into the tomb with Jesus, and out of the tomb with Jesus. And so it's the road that leads to life. And Jesus tells us this. He says he wants us to take this journey and invites us to go with him. When Jesus says, "Come and follow me," it's not an easy journey. And we're going to see already as we've gone through just two, right? The Ash Wednesday, last Sunday. We went through two messages, but it started then with Jesus in the wilderness. And the wilderness was meant to teach us. It was meant to be able to say, this is a time for you to be able to take in all the things that are in the wilderness so that you can learn and grow. That's the intent of it. It wasn't to punish us. The wilderness is never meant to punish. It was always meant to grow. It was always meant for nourishment that God was going to provide. So today, let me give you a little bit of context and background before we jump into the passage. But we're going to be in Mark chapter 8, and that's the only spot that we're going to be in. So if you got your Bibles, you feel free to open them if you like. If it's on your phone, feel free to open that too. That's where I'm going to read mine from today as well. But the context starting then in Mark chapter 8 is this: Peter has just confessed Jesus to be the Christ. Right, so there's this whole thing, and it's been opened up. This is the first time somebody has confessed Jesus to be the Christ in Mark. Now, in that whole part, that means there's a lot of expectations. The expectations are high on Jesus. People are starting to hear this word. Jesus is going from village to town to all kinds of places. He's healing, he's preaching, he's doing all kinds of cool stuff. But people are beginning to say, we like this guy. But then Jesus, just before this, and he'll also clarify, but he starts speaking about suffering. He starts talking about rejection. He starts talking about death, but also resurrection. You see, all of these things can get the disciples a little bit worried, and we're going to see Peter's response to this pretty early on. He's got a pretty sharp response to Jesus. He doesn't like it, right? Because nobody really wants to be able to say, hey, everybody come follow me. You are going to suffer, and it's going to be a good time, right? You're like, what? Wait, suffering? I don't know about this, Jesus. You're healing people. You're doing all kinds of good stuff. But now, aren't you trying to erase suffering? And Jesus is like, there's going to be suffering, there's going to be rejection. But Jesus is trying to be able to say, this path is not just for me, it's for us. It's a path for you, it's a path for me. And it's a path that Jesus says we should go on with him. All right, let's jump into the first part of the passage, Mark chapter 8. If you got it open, 31 is where we're going to start. Then Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things, be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but 3 days later he would rise from the dead. As he talked about this openly with his disciples, Peter took him to a side, right? He pulled him away from the other disciples, and he began to reprimand him for saying such things. Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples, and then he reprimanded Peter. "Get away from me, Satan," he said. "You are seeing things merely from a human point of view and not from God's." This is a hard part, right? Because we have the Messiah that we want versus the Messiah that we need, right? The Messiah that we want is the one who's going to come and conquer, the one who's going to take away all pain and all suffering, the one who's going to be able to, to make us the top dog of all the land, right? We want that Messiah to come to be able to lift us up. And Jesus is then still talking about this whole thing, and he's like, nope, there's going to be suffering, there's going to be rejection. And this is when Peter says, Jesus, what are you doing? What are you talking about? This is not the Messiah that was mentioned in the Old Testament. And Jesus, and this, of course, is Phil's interpretation of the conversation that Peter and Jesus were having, other than he rebuked him. Well, this is what he was rebuking him over. He's saying, Jesus, that doesn't match our vision. Right? Peter's trying to take the CEO position and say, Jesus, you don't get the things that are happening amongst our organization right here. You need to go through corporate training to be able to understand really what the Messiah is supposed to do here, right? He's supposed to come and conquer, overthrow the empire, right? So that we become the ones that are in charge. Jesus, start speaking like that. Right? That's the part where Jesus is like, Peter, do you know I know the Old Testament? Do you know that the Old Testament also speaks of me? He says, you remember the parts where we were talking about David and the Davidic king who comes riding in on a donkey instead of a war horse? He said the Messiah is going to be coming in on a donkey and not a war horse. You see, they were looking for this king who was going to match just the verses that they wanted to cherry pick out of the Old Testament to be able to say, no, this Messiah is going to conquer. He's going to restore us. And Jesus reveals instead a kingdom that is redeemed through suffering and not through conquering. What does that kingdom look like? What is a kingdom that is redeemed through suffering instead of just conquering? What does that look like in the life of disciples? What does it look like in the life of Jesus? When we actually are looking at Jesus, Jesus never talks about a conquering kingdom. He never says, I'm going to come in and I'm going to destroy people so that I can set them free. I'm not going to drop bombs on people to make sure that they find freedom somewhere in the midst of this. That's not Jesus' view. And when we are following Jesus, trying to be able to look at what a kingdom looks like, we're going to say it's revealed through Jesus, and Jesus redeems through suffering. But so many times we rejected this cross-shaped vision of God because it doesn't match what we'd really love to see. We want strength, we want control, we want quick victories. And you see, in the midst of those little easy wins, and we talked a little bit about, this last week in the wilderness and the things that Satan was promising Jesus, right? The devil came to Jesus and was trying to promise him these things and say, hey, you do this, then this is going to happen, right? I'm going to make all the world worship you, and you just got to do this little quick thing, right? And if we saw Jesus say, yeah, I'll take you up on that deal, right? Then Jesus would have been making a quick side deal to make sure that the suffering was cut short. Jesus doesn't do that. And so it challenges what we are trying to view as the Messiah, the Christ, the one who is, the one who has always been. And it challenges us to be able to look at the cross and to be able to say, this is redemption. Redemption for us. Redeemed and bought us back. Purchased us. Our strength, our control, our visions for quick victory should be put to the side to be able to say, God, we need your strength and you to control. Peter's reprimanded, but Jesus continues. Verse 34. Then, calling the crowd to join his disciples, he said, right? So this is for making sure that we recognize the first part of the conversation was just him and his disciples, him and Peter. Now, he's also inviting the crowds to come because he wants them to hear this important message. He says, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. Right? So 3 moves. There's 3 moves that Jesus talks about. He says, deny yourself. He says, take your way out of this. And then he says, take up your cross and follow. So what does that mean? Denying self is not self-hatred. Make sure you recognize that. Jesus is not trying to make sure that you hate yourself so that you can lift up Jesus more. God already knows you, knows your struggle, knows your sin, knows the places where you should have turned right when you turned left, right? All of those things, God already knows it, right? And if God was trying to make you hate yourself, there would have been a lot of other ways that God could have done it to make sure that you hated yourself even more. But here's the thing. This is what the church organization, the religious structure has been putting on people to control people. They would like you to hate yourself more than you love Jesus. They want you to hate yourself. Why? Because then you are the subject of control. Jesus is actually trying to be able to bring freedom here by just saying, deny yourself. And deny yourself is not hating yourself. It is surrendering the illusion that we are at the center of everything. That the sun revolves around us. You see, that's the part where Jesus says, kind of take yourself out of this and be able to put the correct view in. Because he says, if once we deny ourselves, then we're taking ourselves out of the center, not self-hatred, not putting ourselves down, but putting ourselves to the side and having a correct vision. And then what does he say? Take up your cross. Now, this is a hard one, right? Because when we're like, I don't want to take up any cross. Because what is the cross? Now, we don't have this torture tool that we use in our nation anymore. But what was it used for? It was used for killing criminals. And what does Jesus say? Even before he knows that he's going to go to he knows he's going to go to the cross. Before he even goes to the cross, he's saying, you all are going to take up your cross with me. So we're walking towards death. And that's a hard thing for us to be able to consider, to walk towards death. It means that there's going to be a costly obedience. That in us says, instead of being able to walk my own path and to make my own decisions and not consider Christ and not consider what God wants, I'm going to just do my own thing, right? That's not costly obedience. That's self-obedience. Remember, we're trying to take ourselves out of this. We're out at the center. And so this costly obedience says, I'm going to do what God wants me to do. And sometimes that's going to cost us. Sometimes that's not going to be the easy path that we're going to be able to walk. So Jesus says, take up your cross. Costly, obey the things that I'm going to tell you to do. And then he says, follow. Right? Follow me. Which is, as we are then looking at ourselves, aligning our lives with Jesus. Saying, Jesus, I'm going to walk with you. You're calling me to walk this path with you, then let's do this together. And you're going to look at your life and you're going to try to be able to align your life with Jesus. Not just in admiration, because there's a lot of Jesus admirers. What does the Jesus admire? They're like, oh yeah, that Jesus guy, he was cool. Right? He did cool things, right? Water into wine, that's cool. Kept the party going. That's something that we can admire in Jesus' way, right? He did a lot of cool things. Set the blind to see. He raised the dead. He allowed people to walk that couldn't walk their entire life. Like, this is cool. I admire Jesus for coming to those people, right? That's an admiration. I even admire his words sometimes. He says, love your neighbor. That's a cool idea. You see, admiration can say, I like Jesus. I like some of the things that Jesus said. That's not aligning our lives with Jesus. Because when Jesus says to love God and love our neighbor, you see, some of those things make it a lot more complicated. Jesus says, are you willing to still continue down this path, following me, aligning your life with me even when it's hard? Jesus continues, verse 35. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. So this is the part when we talk about I believe this is the heartbeat of this text. It's the thing that should make your heart beat about it, because what it is, it's trying to be able to show you something. Jesus is saying we're trying to be able to gain so much. And our instinct inside of us is to continue to preserve everything that we have. We need to preserve the stuff, right? The things. We need to protect. We need to secure ourselves. We need to cling to our reputation. We need to avoid risk, hold grudges, and protect our own comfort. You see, when we're doing all of this thing, this is what we call the scarcity mindset. The scarcity mindset says, I have to protect everything that I currently have, because if I lose even just a little bit of this, then I'm going to lose everything. And so the scarcity says, I need this, and if I get a little bit more, that's good too, and then I'll continue to protect that and to continue to cling to it, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. And Jesus says all of that stuff, when you're doing it, you're grabbing, right? You're grabbing and holding. You're grabbing and holding, grabbing and holding. And you're trying to hold on so tightly to the things that you have, instead of being able to say, God, do I trust you with my life? You see, when we've got our hands gripped because we're trying to be able to grab more, everything is just closed. And we're trying to grab more and trying to hold more and trying to hold more. And then we're saying, God, this is my job now. I have to protect my kingdom. And Jesus is looking at this and saying, what are you trying to do? You're grabbing all of this stuff for what? Because you think that this is going to save you. It's going to protect you. He says when we're doing all of this, we're grabbing all this stuff. He's like, we're actually losing our life. And that life goes back to our soul and the thing that kind of is just the internal parts of us, that God made us to be us. And he's saying, you are losing that. And so when Jesus says actually release, open your hands. Trust God to do what God already said he's going to do. Because he says that this actually goes to the very soul of us, the thing that's in us. And God's like, I want that person. So what does it mean? It means to forgive even when it costs us. It means to serve without that that human recognition where somebody's going to make sure to highlight you. It means that we're going to charge into obedience and say, God, whatever it takes today. You see, that's the part when he says, when we actually release, when we say, God, this is going to be yours, and this is the part where God says that there's freedom in it. Because when you're looking at this, and I'll just give you an instance of this, so I love my family, but here's the part about it. But if I try to hold on to my family with that gripped hands, I'm saying I'm the only one who can love my family the way I love them. You see, and God's like, have you forgot about me? He's like, I made your family. I put my fingerprint on your family. He's like, I love them more than you could ever love them. Why are you holding on to them so tightly? Release. Do I believe that God can take care of my family better than me? Absolutely, 100%. You see, in every single one of those instances, the things that we are trying to hold on to in our life, do you believe that God can be your provider and we can say, God, I'm going to let you have this? Let's continue. 36. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world and yet lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? Jesus is reframing success, right? Because we know what we think and what I would say that the world presents success to look like. And we're like, yeah, we need some more of that success. We want that money, those possessions, that power, that authority, right? That's what they tell us that success should look like. And Jesus is like, hold up. Are you trying to be able to gain more of that? What is that going to do for you? For Jesus, he's saying this is a soul question, right? This is not a matter of just accumulating more and more and more stuff. He's saying this goes back to your soul, as we had talked about. So where might we be trying to gain externally but losing us internally? Where is it that we're trying to be able to grip and to hold more and more and more instead of being able to say, God, you have to be able to take this from me? We continue, the last verse. If anyone is ashamed of me and my message in these adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in the glory of his Father with his holy angels. Now, here's a passage that I think most people have been terrified about. Because when we see this, it's a pretty sharp rebuke, right? Jesus is saying, if you are ashamed of me, ultimately, I'm going to be ashamed of you. And once again, it kind of puts us in that box of, like, am I ever feeling ashamed? Sometimes I feel ashamed. Sometimes I don't want to say what I think I should say. Sometimes I don't do what I want to do. So does that all fall in this shame bucket? And then I find myself digging my own hole of shame. And this is where I want you to take a look at with this, maybe, because I want you to reframe this as well, because this is another one of those context things that I think Jesus is trying to be able to bring in for us, but we miss it by some of the translations that we use, because we talk about being ashamed, and that's in there. That's a word that they use, but it's like, here's this. He's not saying all of you, when you feel ashamed or sometimes of the words that you should speak and you don't speak, he's saying by this type of people, right? And so you're looking at this, you're like, so what type of people is Jesus talking about? And those words that they often translate, and it usually goes across the board, this adulterous and sinful, these are not the words that it actually says. It actually says untrustworthy or mistaken. These are words that are usually directed at people that Jesus challenges. Who's the one that Jesus challenges the most in all of the Gospels? The Pharisees, the teachers of the law, those that are within that religious structure. So what is Jesus actually trying to be able to say? He's saying, when you, these people that are stuck in this system, then this same thing that you always try to beat people down with the law, he's like, you should be ashamed of yourself. Because when I go to the Father, like, you guys aren't coming with me. That's the part that Jesus is ashamed of. Because he knows our limitations. He knows where we have fallen short. He knows when, yes, I could have lifted up Jesus in this conversation. I could have loved my neighbor better. I could have done this. And it's not a part that we should be digging our own holes to be able to say, I need to feel ashamed, 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 ashamed. He's saying, when you, by these people who have been untrustworthy with the word that was given to them, who have mistaken the words that the Messiah was supposed to come and do, he's saying, this is shame. So when Jesus is trying to be able to bring that all into focus, remember who he's brought in to listen to this. Peter, who rebuked him. He rebuked him because Jesus didn't fit his vision for the Messiah of what he thought it should be in that same religious box. Peter, you should be ashamed. Let the Messiah be the Messiah. And when we know the Messiah, and the Messiah says, I've come to redeem, and I'm doing it through suffering. This isn't a part where Jesus is trying to make sure that we're digging our own hole. He's saying it's time for us to release some of the things that we've tried to put God, the Messiah, in a box. And he's saying, let God be God. The wilderness last week was all about teaching dependence upon God. This week, it's all about relinquishing, not holding on with tight hands, but with open hands to say, God, what do you have? Let me see the Messiah work across generations, across cultures, across people that we never thought possible. God, I'm going to open my hands to be able to see that you are bigger than sometimes we ever let you be. So let's open our hands today. Release the grip. And praise Jesus for it. Please stand and pray.